good afternoon, colleagues and friends, and welcome to this session of today, Net Zero Cities, Transforming Cities in Europe with Renewable Energy. My name is Giorgia Rambelli, and I'm the Coordinator for Climate Policy and Energy Governance at the European Secretariat of ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability, and it will be my great pleasure to moderate today's session. This event is taking place in the framework of the European Sustainable Energy Week and is organized by REN21, Renewable Energy Policy Network for the 21st Century, ICLEI and C40. As the areas in which most people live and work, and as the areas that is often the most vulnerable to the effect of climate change, cities are increasingly acknowledged as the arena in which solutions to major societal and environmental challenges must be developed and implemented. Local governments across Europe are very well aware of the role that they must play, especially in delivering both local and national decarbonization goals, in order to reach collectively and to achieve collectively a climate neutral Europe by 2050. To this end, local governments and cities have been increasingly taking action. They have been advancing ambitious climate and energy policies and implementing measures, becoming global frontrunners in both setting and working towards the implementation of ambitious renewable energy and net zero targets. Today, we will discuss exactly this. We will talk about what are the remaining challenges that they are finding, what are the solutions that are out there needed to help cities to unlock the full potential and to accelerate renewable energy in support of both national and global decarbonization goals. We will look into the barriers, but also the opportunity to scale up renewables in Europe, including access to the necessary investment, adequate policy framework, multi-level policy that will be able to help transforming this energy system and tapping the full potential of renewable energy in European cities. Together with our panel, we will explore how cities can now leverage this momentum and the opportunities that we have, and they have been brought by also by the green recovery that we are facing and is ahead of us, but also to reduce demand of energy, to further develop and to scale up even more sustainable energy solution using Europe's rich renewable energy sources. We also, of course, want to hear very much from you. So while we will kindly ask you to please keep your microphone mute, we encourage you already from now to submit your questions, to share your experiences and your thoughts via the chat function. We will make sure to engage you into the discussion throughout our session today. So to kick off the discussion and to set the scene and to share an overview of what are the trends and the developments of renewables energy in European cities, it is my great pleasure to introduce and to give the floor to Rana Adib. She's the Executive Director of REN21, Renewable Energy Policy Network for the 21st Century. Rana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Giorgia, for the introduction. And hello, colleagues. Welcome, everybody. I'm very, very excited that we have the opportunity in the European Sustainable Energy Week to have, together with our partners, ICLEI and C40, co-organize this event. So to kick the discussion off, I'm going to quickly share some of the insights we have consolidated from Renton side in the course of the last Renewables Global Status Report, Renewables and Cities Global Status Report. So it's about net zero cities, transforming cities in Europe with renewable energy. Now, for the ones of you who don't know us as Renton, I think I would really like to quickly pause here because it explains a lot why we're looking into renewables in cities. So Renton is the only global community of renewable energy actors from science, academia, NGOs, governments, and industry. And I think this sounds quite complex, many different perspectives, but is ultimately very strong because it's very clear that the transformations we're talking about today are involving many players, many different perspectives. And what we need to understand and find is the common ground. We need to develop shared knowledge. We need to develop shared dialogue, debates, and really identify basically where to push, how to push. Renton has 90 members, but really an international community of over 2,000 community members, strongly collaborating with their decentralized intelligence in driving this global transition to shift to renewable energy now. Now, why are we doing this? And I think I would really like, before moving to the cities topic, just quickly see where we are standing today. This is a figure we have developed in the last Renewables Global Status Report, and it's the situation in the energy systems worldwide. You see here the total final energy consumption on the left side in 2009, on the right side in 2019. And you can see that there's an extraordinary development of renewable energy, moving from 8.7% to 11.2%, very much driven by developments, cost reductions in photovoltaic and wind, etc. But the overall reality in the energy system is that the share of fossil fuel in energy demand is stable in the same time. And this means that we are burning more fossil fuels today than ever. So what does this mean? And I think it's really important that we are all aware of this deep structural change required. It's not enough anymore to basically promote energy saving, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. We need to phase out fossil fuel, and this means that there are very deep societal, economic, energy systems, infrastructure changes that need to happen. And it means that we need to collectively change norms. Now, in some moments where the numbers seem to be very critical and rather generating some pessimism, I think that there are really some good examples, recent examples also, where we see that changing norms is possible. It is possible when players work together. It is possible when we have the policy ambition, regulator frameworks, and also a push from different players in society. When we're looking again at renewable energy, we're speaking about making renewable energy mainstream, making renewable energy the norm. And this means from Renton one side that we cannot continue talking to the energy bubble only, but that it means to really build a deep and broad societal support with attention, social political attention of policymakers at all levels, market acceptance, not only from market players in the energy field, but also from all energy consumers, and very clearly also citizens' acceptance. And I think that this panel of challenge, but also opportunities, clearly indicates why we are looking into the role of cities in this transition. Now, we have published at the beginning of the year, in collaboration with many city networks and many other players, over 350 participants or contributors took part in this only stock taking of cities' energy transition worldwide. We published this report, and this report is really looking into market developments, policy trends, industry trends, community energy investment, but is also highlighting some of the case studies. Because what is also very clear is that numbers and facts is often not enough to tell the story and also attract basically decision makers' interest. So why looking at cities? I think we're speaking about the societal change, and cities are clearly a hub of society. When we're looking, however, just in the facts, we see that cities are responsible for 75% of the CO2 emissions, 3/4 of the total energy consumption, 55% of the global population lives in cities. And when we are thinking about climate change, it's also very clear that a part of being high impact areas, cities are also areas that are very vulnerable to climate change. 90% of the cities globally are basically in climate vulnerable conditions. When we're looking at the right side, we see the energy system again, which also leads us again to the key role cities play. I spoke about the share of fossil fuel. When we are looking at the different types of, or the different end use sector segments, we see that much of the big developments of renewable energy are taking place in the power sector, where we have a share of 26.4% of renewable energy. The reality is, however, that we are consuming more than 80% of the energy we consume is being consumed for heating, cooling, and transportation. Heating and cooling, more or less 50% in buildings, 50% in industry. And here, unfortunately, the transition to a renewable-based system is really much, much slower, with a share of 10% and 3.3% only in transport. So this already showed that when we're looking at the cities, road transportation is very present, buildings are very present, and we also see that many drivers from the urban agendas are actually also pointing to a key role of the energy transition. Clean air and a healthy environment, So climate change, obviously, mitigation and adaptation, local economic development. The reality is that renewable energy really allows for the development of a local energy, of a real energy governance, and where players who were rather energy consumers in the past can today become energy producers and also an actor in the energy system. Energy justice and democracy, clearly also questions of stable and secure energy supply. And when we're speaking about developing countries in particular, the question of energy access, which is fundamental because energy is the key to social and economic development. And then considering the fact that renewable energy is a least cost option today in many countries, also reducing expenses and managing costs, because here we are independent of price markets, I guess, like price situations that are defined by few. Now, the good news really from this report is that cities clearly recognize that renewable energy is an opportunity per se, but is also an opportunity for them to reach their own urban agenda. Over 1,300 cities have a renewable energy target or policy. And interestingly, we clearly see that they are directly renewable energy targets, but that they can also be supported indirectly by targets on divestment of fossil fuels, for instance, or net zero commitments. This means that 1 billion people live in a city with a renewable energy target or a policy. This is 25% of the global urban population. So I think really a very encouraging number. When we're looking at the targets, so city governments commit to renewables. More than 830 cities in 72 countries had a renewable energy target. And here we clearly see that there is a concentration in North America and Europe, where, to be honest, the energy markets are also already quite advanced in terms of opening up and allowing for instance, independent power producers, etc. What is clear, however, that much basically of these targets is focusing on the power sector. We also see that there is other entry points. Around 800 city governments in 63 countries had net zero targets. And interestingly, I think this is something which is in the comparison quite impressive. We have much more cities in Asia and Latin America supporting renewable energy by focusing on net zero. Why is this the case? There is a commitment clearly on decarbonization, which is a real topic, also because the climate vulnerability is quite high, but also topics like air pollution are key drivers in those cities. I think the example, so just to also share a bit some of the examples we highlight, the example of Oxford is actually quite interesting because Oxford also declared the climate emergency in 2019. And this is something which also shows that citizens and cities are contributing to push the ambition of governments, local governments, and ultimately also national governments. Oxford created the Citizens' Assembly, and Oxford also aims to become net zero by 2030, compared to the UK government, which has a target to become net zero by 2050. So I think what is really interesting here is to see that cities also play a key role in basically making renewable energy supported by citizens, but also develop another governance around this topic. Now, it's very clear the targets are not enough, and that's something which I think is showing more and more, and our role as players will be to really point to the fact, are targets followed by action? And are we on track with regard to this to avoid that in 10 years' time, we're not looking back and saying like we missed opportunities here? First thing cities are doing, can do, is scaling up basically or leading by example across all sectors with their own municipal operations. This means scaling up renewable electricity. So where do they buy electricity? They can also become electricity producers, decarbonizing urban transport. And here clearly we see that electrification is a key role or is a key trend. What we don't see yet is that electrification is mandatorily bound to the use of renewable power. So I think there is a real opportunity to scale up, decarbonizing heat in the countries where it's necessary. And this directly leads us also to this question of expanding infrastructure urban planning and integrating basically the energy topic here. The example of Malmö is really interesting with regard to this. Malmö has plans for the entire city to run on 100% renewable energy by 2030. And what is interesting here, Malmö has really not only integrated the activities in the different sectors, whether it is the energy supply, building, transportation, but they've also worked together with surrounding municipalities to build on each other in terms of targets, investments, project developments. And they also have clearly integrated this in a circular economy approach, for instance, using municipal solid waste to make it useful for energy uses production. Now, we see also that cities understand that they have a regulatory power they can use to accelerate the transition towards renewables. Almost 800 cities had policies supporting renewable energy, again, with a focus on North America and Europe. What is interesting, and you recall the slide on the more challenging sectors like heating, cooling, and transportation, we see that cities clearly see themselves at the nexus topics, at the topic of energy in heating and cooling and in transportation, because the regulatory power they use is also focusing on those sectors and energy uses. So was transferred 383 cities, and heating and cooling or heating and cooling in buildings was 152 and 173 cities. Now, the case of Heidelberg, again, is interesting for different reasons. Heidelberg has also declared climate emergency in 2019 and has the target to become climate neutral by 2050, which is one of the first cities actually to have such a target. What is interesting, they have a municipal district heating system that runs on 50% renewable energy with a goal to achieve 100% renewables. Again, we see like how infrastructure is fundamental. And what is also interesting here, Heidelberg really aims at producing 1/3 of the renewable energy locally. And I think this is really a real game changer of renewable energy. Cities and regions, territories can become basically climate and energy independent. Another aspect is clearly that cities also understand that it's not enough to support efficiency and renewables, but that it's necessary to phase out fossil fuel. On the left side, you'll see what California and European cities, but in particular in North America, that's a trend to ban fossil fuel in buildings. On the right side, we see how a number of cities has defined low emission zones and vehicle bans of certain technologies with a focus on Europe. So banning always means that it also is an opportunity for building up alternatives. And so there is a lot of hope here and opportunities, I think. It's also very clear that there are barriers to action. I'll start with one, because I think it's really such a shocking number. Fossil fuel subsidies, according to a most recent study, is 1.1 million euros, US dollars per minute. And I pause here. It's shocking, and it's even more shocking considering the fact that the external negative impacts of fossil fuels are not even accounted for in this number. So this obviously leads to the fact that national subsidies with regard to this do have an impact on local action because they are competing, and in particular in sectors that are highly dependent on fossil fuel. So the heating and cooling sector, the heating sector in particular, and the transport sector. What we have seen in the report too, or in this research, was clearly the lacking awareness. On the one side, the lacking awareness of the role renewable energy can play as an urban opportunity. And as a result also that many cities do not even see themselves as energy player. So this is clearly one thing. It's also logical because basically the cities are not always focusing in particular on renewable energy. And I think us as renewable energy player, we also need to better understand how renewables support the urban agenda so that we can basically bridge the ecosystems and the communication. But it's something which is clearly a reality. The other aspect is also that national governments may actually not consider the change-making role and the impactful role cities can have in that transition. Then, depending on the region, municipal governments have lacking legislative power, and access to resources is also and can be a challenge in terms of capacities, but also obviously in terms of access to finance. So I think that at COP there will be clearly discussions about access to finance for cities, and also beyond basically all the biggest, the mega cities. I mentioned conflicting policy and priorities. Fossil fuel subsidies is one example, but it is very clear that national and subnational and local policy and regulatory frameworks need to build on each other more, and there needs to be an integration, as we also need an integration between the different energy sectors. And then lacking data to really track the developments. So to build on city strengths, we need to basically empower them even more. From one side, we clearly see that renewable energy is an urban opportunity, that we are speaking about a global transition, but that local action is fundamental to reach these global goals, and that cities need the power to act. Aligning policies is fundamental. So I'm ending here and look forward for an interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rana, for this overview. It was a very complete and extremely interesting, I think, looking into not only the challenges, but also really what is the potential there. I particularly enjoyed digging into some of these examples that can truly inspire our conversation. And I think you touched upon a couple of key aspects that are very much at the core of what cities and local governments can do. They can act as service provider. That's where, for example, this integrated approach to the energy system comes at play. And it's definitely a great opportunity. You touch upon the leading by example, the fact that they can galvanize the activity of the community. And we know now in Europe, there is this new legislation into setting up energy communities. Hopefully there will be also a good opportunity to, again, trigger all of this action, but also very much really also using the power of purchase, for example, through public procurement, to also make the right choices and to move away from this fossil fuel base that you have discussed. So thank you very much for getting us started with this. And I would definitely encourage all of our colleagues in the audience to please note down your questions in the chat. We will have a lot of opportunity to continue discussion with Rana in just a few minutes. So don't be shy, please share your thoughts. And speaking of sharing your thoughts, I would like now to invite our other two panelists a little bit to share with us their perspective. So I think it would be interesting to understand a little bit why do we need cities in the energy transition, but also why do cities want to be part of the energy transition? And maybe I would ask Constant to get us started a little bit with that specific point. And I understand, Constant, that you have an object that you wanted to share with us that really represents your vision on this point. So I leave you the floor, and we are all very excited to hear more about what this object is.
Thank you very much, Giorgia, and great to be here. Thank you for a great introduction. And yeah, I really invite everyone to read this report. I read it every day. It's amazing. It's got lots of information. So please do have a look. Great work from the REN 21 team. So the object I brought, I'm traveling, so I only have a very small object with me at the moment, but I brought a pack of cards. I don't know if you can see it with a Zoom background, but the reason for that is twofold. The first one, which I think is the reason why we're here today, is that we really believe at C40 that cities have kind of an ace up their sleeve, as we say, when it comes to the renewable energy transition. The emergence of modern distributed renewable technologies really mean that cities hold the key to the transition towards decarbonizing energy system. They are really at the heart of a system that can be more democratized, more decentralized, more decarbonized, and more digitalized, obviously, where consumers also become producers, and where sectors such as heating, transport, and electricity are fully integrated through digital technologies. And obviously, cities being the place where all the things come together are really key to be able to achieve that. They are the level of government closest to citizens, which means that they can play a critical role in what Rana had described just before, in terms of changing the social norms, changing the social acceptance of renewables, but also from a very technical perspective, helping to bring in the grid some of this flexibility that is needed should we include higher rates of renewable within the grid, whether it is through sector integration, through behavioral changes, and critically through energy efficiency improvements. The benefits of the transition for cities, I think, are very clear. Cities understand that to power more sustainable, more equitable and vibrant communities, they need to adopt a new energy system that can create more local jobs, that can improve our health, that can make energy more affordable, critical problem today in parts of Europe, a very important one. It can really help to play a role in reducing energy poverty. I think critically, it can help to reduce air pollution. Again, a global health emergency, and the WHO recently reminded us of the urgency to fight this kind of twin pandemic that goes along the climate crisis. And at C40, where I work, a network of the world's largest megacities committed to tackle climate change, our mayors, because of those benefits, have been calling very strongly on national governments to prioritize renewables in the green and just recovery stimulus packages. The other reason why I brought a pack of cards is because for everyone who likes to play cards, they know that it has nothing to do with chance. It's all about how you play the hand that you're dealt with. And I think that's again a critical thing that cities should keep in mind. Too often, I think still today we hear that cities don't have the right powers to act on the energy transition. They don't have the right tools. But I think again, what Rana has said and what Giorgia has said already is that there is always something cities can do. There is always a role that they can play in accelerating the energy transition, whether it is through leading by example, whether it is through incentivizing residents or businesses to adopt renewables, whether it is mandating renewables in building codes or forbidding the use of natural gas in buildings. And I think this idea that there is a wide range of tools and actions that cities can take is really an important one that cities need to keep in mind. At C40, a few weeks ago, we've launched a new initiative called the Renewable Energy Declaration, which is basically a statement of ambition from mayors from 15 large cities all over the world, representing about 75 million people, committing to the highest targets on clean energy deployment, such as decarbonizing electricity supply by 2035, achieving universal energy access by 2030, or maximizing the local production of renewable within the city. And Paris is one of the signatory cities, and you'll hear from Yann later on. But I think what the diversity of cities that have signed up to this declaration shows is that, again, cities understand that there is a lot that they can do. There are many tools, many actions that they can take, and it's about really embracing the opportunity, being a little bit creative, looking at solutions such as energy communities, such as using waste heat in local district energy systems, helping residents to buy renewables through aggregated procurement schemes, etc., etc. There is a lot you can do. I can talk about that a little bit later on. But I think the kind of conclusion of that is to say cities need to embrace it. They need to look at it in a comprehensive way, and they need to identify the opportunities that work best for them. And national governments need to be there. Energy companies need to be there, large businesses need to be there to accompany and to work collaboratively with cities to make the transition happen. The last thing I wanted to say is that I think the event is called Transforming City with Renewables. I think that's so important. That's such a great word. Renewables do provide an opportunity to really transform how we live in our cities, how to move toward more democratized energy systems that leave a bigger role to play for citizens. And I think it's a great way of thinking about the world we want to build and the cities we want to build through the deployment of modern renewable technologies.
Thank you very much, Constant. I think I fully agree. And I also particularly appreciated the fact that you brought down the discussion also to our citizens ultimately, because as you said very rightly, they are the closest level to the population, the closest level to the citizens, and the fact that we can use renewable as an opportunity to engage more democratically our citizens, but also to try to tackle issues such as energy poverty, or even engaging better vulnerable groups, I think is something that is crucial and essential if you're talking about sustainability for our future towards 2050. So thank you very much. And definitely we want to hear more about, of course, your initiative, but also a little bit more about the challenges that you feel that these cities, although very committed, are still facing. But I want to know a little bit how is Paris playing the hand that it was dealt with. So I would like to give now the floor to Yann. And I understand that, Yann, you don't have an object, but you rather have facts and figures, and a picture speaks 1,000 words. So I understand that we have a slide that we should display for you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yann Françoise from City of Paris. It's a pleasure to be with you. I don't know what I have to say more because Rana and Constance say everything about the topic and city and renewable energy. About City of Paris, maybe you know, City of Paris began to tackle climate change issues around 2007 with the first climate action plan. But more recently, in 2018, City of Paris adopted a new climate action plan to follow the Paris Agreement. Apparently, we have the same name, so we have a kind of responsibility to become climate neutral. And so this plan is to become climate neutral by 2050. And that's quite easy on the paper to put that and to decide everyone to be and to follow the goal to become climate neutral. But finally, when we try to transform, how we say, these physical equations in reality, what does it mean to become carbon neutral for City of Paris? One of the part of the equations on mitigations is to divide by 2 the energy demand and to get 100% of renewable energy. Without 100% of renewable energy, we can't be carbon neutral by 2050. But if we can't have our energy demand by 2050, we can't get 100% of renewable energy. It's that's the main important thing. The first goal for us, so target, is not to become a 100% renewable cities, is to become a very, very powerful energy efficiency city to decrease the demand. The first renewable energy of the city, that is the energy that we don't consume by the end of the middle of this century. That's the main question. But after that, what does it mean? Because if we want to divide by 2 the energy demand, we need to retrofit, for one example, 1 million flat units in next 30 years. That's a wonderful works for builders, but it means that to go faster than 25 times that now. So it's a huge challenge. For each renovation, we have to, of course, implement renewable energy as max as possible. And we don't have to forget, as he was saying, the case of mobility, because as you may know, we want to go faster on mobility. We want to ban fossil fuel all by 2024 for diesel and 2030 for benzene. That's huge. But we have to think that we have still cars and trucks for deliver the city, for example, for delivering the city, sorry. And so we need energy, but which one? Which kind of energy? Electricity, we have to be sure that it's a renewable energy. Electricity, we must be sure that the infrastructure will be robust for this huge of charge for the city, and for trucks, for public transportation, how to be sure to have enough biogas. And so we need regulations. We have a low emission zone, but we need also robust infrastructure to dialogue with all the stakeholders, and of course to the regional level, to the national level, and sometimes to European level. Is maybe an evidence, but it's very hard, you know, to manage all the policy aligned in the same moment, with the same target, and sometimes with, of course, different colors of parties, of leaders, and so on. So it's a huge challenge for us, because a city alone, we can't deal with such a target. We have, it's very important, as Rana says, that city must understand that they have maybe one win or a beginning of the power, but we don't have the solution alone. So we have to align everything together. And as it was said before, we have to align with the idea that we mustn't leave anyone behind these energy transitions. And renewable energy, for the moment, is more expensive. Of course, we hope that now, with maybe a price of gas oil more and more increasing, there will be some positive consequences for the development of renewable energy. But we do know that there is a very bad consequences of energy poverty, as it was said before. So one of the main priority for City of Paris, but for a lot of cities, is not only to become carbon neutral, but also to be a fair and inclusive city, and to be sure that this renewable energy will be affordable for everyone and accessible for everyone. And that's not a main issue, because if we take our own example of City of Paris, like a lot of old city in Europe, to integrate solar panels in our roof in very heritage city is not so easy, and it costs a lot. It costs more than to put solar panels in the ground in the countryside. So it's a huge question, but it's the only one solution to become carbon neutral. Of course, there will be wonderful benefits on air quality too, if we can ban all the diesel fuel or the oil fuel from City of Paris. But we have a huge challenge to work together with everyone to accelerate the regulation, to accelerate the incentive, and to make compatibility from all the policy from European level to local level and regional level, and of course for us, for national level as a French state. I hope I was clear for the first part of the webinar.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Yann, for sharing your thoughts and your experience on this. I think the point around the importance of all driving towards the same direction together, something that cannot be done just with one unique type of stakeholder. We need everyone to be rowing in the same direction. I think it's a very important point. And I think that the other point that you made about the speed is also quite important. I don't know if you read recently in the past few days, the news around this new research that is showing how a child born in 2020 will have to endure 30 extreme heat waves in their lifetime, which is 7 times as many as someone that was born in the 60s. It's a terrifying thought, no? And I think definitely the role of renewables and the role of sustainable approaches to integrating a better and more sustainable energy system is crucial to make sure that we all go into that direction. So maybe continuing to this, and we talked about a little bit why cities are engaging. We talked about a little bit the great things that are already being implemented. I would like to go back, maybe starting from Rana again. You gave us a little bit of an overview of the different challenges that you have mapped within your report. Could you maybe zoom in into what do you think that the support mechanisms that we need nowadays should be? What should we prioritize to make sure that we can accelerate as fast as possible the full potential of cities into the energy transition, and in particular into really tapping the potential of renewables in Europe? So you're on mute, Rana.
Yes, excuse me, I have kids in the background, so that's why. One part which is given in Europe, luckily, and I think this is where Europe is really a privileged region, it's a liberalization of the electricity markets. And that is something which I think is fundamental, and building on this, I think it is really the awareness, access to finance from the cities, innovative business models. And I think as Yann has underlined, especially in space-constrained cities, a strong integration also in the territories and collaboration with smaller cities in the suburbs to really implement finance mechanism and have the possibility to become renewable electricity producers. So this is one part. The other part, when we're looking into transport, I think there is very clearly the trend of electrification of the transport sector, in particular road transportation. It's very clear that from transport, we have the part as avoid, shift, improve. And again, I think the figures of Paris show this very clearly. The first thing is obviously to reduce the energy demand. The reality is today that we cannot drive this in a sequential way. We need to drive this in an integrated way. We don't have time. Integrated solutions are key. In the building sector, for instance, having mandates in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of own energy generation. So a share, for instance, of the generation of the energy consumed in cities in the building, when we're speaking about new buildings, at least. So I think an integration basically of efficiency and renewable energy is fundamental. When we're looking into transport, sorry, I'm coming back to transport, avoiding transportation, shifting to public transport, but then the transport which is there needs to be renewable based. And I think this is something which can be driven much more strongly and in an integrated way. I think globally there is from the 8 countries, for instance, banning fossil fuel or the internal combustion engines, only 8 have committed to 100% renewable energy. And only 3 countries worldwide, and this again, it's country statistics, I don't have the city statistics in mind, but have an integrated way that they are supporting electrification and then also force the purchase of renewable power. So I think there are kind of low-hanging fruit with regard to this. And interestingly, there's also low-hanging fruit linking again to the private sector. I think we didn't speak about the private sector very much here, but I take the example of Paris. I'm living in Paris and I'm amazed to see like all big distribution lorries announcing that they are running on biomethane, on electricity, on natural gas. Even though they might not be on renewable, they will try to pretend that they are running on renewables. And what is interesting here is obviously those fleets are not only operating in Paris. This is like company-wide integration of standards. And I think this is clearly something where cities and municipalities can focus on having high standards on the areas where the change will go beyond the city boundaries, but create to really make the norm in the sector, so the distribution sector, for instance, in the building sector, and then ripple down again or move up again at the national level. So I think there are some low-hanging fruit. And then the other part is clearly citizens' energy. And this is something which is important now, but will be even more important tomorrow. Any technology does have an impact. It has a social impact, it has an environmental impact. So we need to develop sustainability approaches here. And driving this change with citizen support is fundamental. And I think this is clearly something where reserving some of the renewable energy investments to citizens programs is really key.
Thank you, Rana.
Sorry, lots of talking.
No,
many ideas.
I think it's very interesting. What I also was wondering, though, listening to your comment, of course, you were mentioning a lot the importance of these integrated approaches from a technical perspective when it comes to the energy system across the different sector, working with the citizen, working with the business. But maybe looking now at Constant and Yann, I would have a follow-up question. That is, what is the role of the integration across level of government? So we already heard the point on aligning policies as much as possible, but what is, in your opinion, the role of multi-level governance in facilitating these processes, for example? So I don't know if you have any example or any idea of how that could look like in order to support local governments.
Yeah, it's a very important question. And as I say, sometimes we are not on the same time, the same good time between the national level and local level. One of the main issues, I think, and sometimes the contradiction came from European level, is we have more and more citizens, I think, in cities that they want to have renewable energy supply around them to invest. They have money and they want maybe to invest by participatory budget and so on. But we have to find and to have easy solutions for funding renewable project by citizens' money, for example, or by private companies, because sometimes there is a better payback than the national level of local investment, for example. But recently, European directives that we must apply in France forbid that to combine feed-in tariff when you have that in a country and citizens or local initiative. So it's a pity. Of course, we can find solutions. We won't create renewable energy initiative. We create maybe safety initiative to protect the solar cells on the roof, for example, or the worker and so on. But finally, it's not so fair because we can't compare, of course, the solar power and the payback from systems in south of Europe and the north of Europe. So we have to maybe challenge the law for that, and to combine the solution. The other thing is the regulation. Regulation is very, very essential for France, because you know that it's a very, very central state. There is no decentralization for the energy topics. We have still some state companies that manage electricity and gas, and as Rana says, in France they like to say it's natural gas. I would like to say that it's a fossil gas, to explain to people that they emit GHG emissions, but it's a huge, huge challenge. And we have to work then, and the same thing, we have to work, as it was said, with private investors, with stakeholders. And it was one of the idea of the city of Paris is to create a specific renewable energy company facilities to gather different solutions of funding from citizens, from private sectors, sometimes from public money, and to invest in renewable energy locally, or maybe we can talk after that, in the rural countryside. It's a huge challenge to drive the solutions and to facilitate the solution, because there is solutions, there is fundings, but sometimes there is a lot of barriers for investors.
Thank you very much, Yann. I think your point about looking at the cities as part of a larger ecosystem in connection also with the peri-urban and the region surrounding it's extremely important. And I think also your reflection around the mandates and the difficulty that it might be in trying to roll out solutions that can apply to this larger system, it's very important. I also saw the comment on public procurement in chat from Rana. Absolutely a great potential there for local governments, of course, to influence this whole process is constant. What is your perspective on this specific point? Multi-level governance, integration of action. What do you think is the support scheme that will be there and needed for cities to accelerate this process?
I mean, multi-level governance is you know, a difficult topic and problem for cities across sectors. It's not only true in the energy transition. It might be more true or more relevant when we talk about this topic, because again, I do think cities have been a little bit overlooked when it comes to energy decarbonization initiatives. They haven't been seen as central players by the kind of traditional centralized energy utility model that has prevailed for, you know, most of the last century or most of the last 50 years or so. So definitely an important topic. I think we are missing in Europe, but not only in Europe, but fora and spaces of regulatory discussion and negotiations between new actors in energy markets. So, you know, in most of Europe, in regulated markets, we've got regulators and they used to discuss with retailers and energy companies a little bit more today with citizens, a little bit more with large businesses that are also, you know, looking to play a more active role on energy markets. And maybe cities will be the next kind of group of stakeholders that will become more involved in those conversations, but those spaces to have those conversations don't really exist from a formal or regulatory perspective yet, and they need to be much, much more developed, and we need to have a much more democratized way of looking at how to build the energy systems of tomorrow. In the US, there's been a few examples recently of cities that have become involved in regulatory proceedings with the regulators at the state level in places where the market is liberalized. So it's literally cities submitting official kind of views and advice or comments on specific regulations and specific very technical rules about how the energy system operates. I think this is something that we'll see more of in Europe. Cities have taken a more active role in this space when it comes to air quality, for example. I mean, Paris is a good example of that, but, you know, cities suing national governments for not respecting national regulations. I think we'll see more of that in the energy markets as well, especially in the electricity market, and that is likely to be an important step forward. But again, we need those spaces to exist, and we need national governments and large utilities to create this space for those conversations. One final thing I wanted to say, Yann mentioned the energy companies. We see a few cities in Europe creating them now. London has created one recently, and Barcelona as well. This is a very interesting way for cities to be involved in energy conversations by kind of adopting the existing model or the existing entry points that are out there for stakeholders to have an active role in setting up regulations and setting up energy system rules. So yeah, very interesting model. As again, I think we'll see more and more of those being created, but companies, cities that don't set up those energy companies should still think about the role they can play in those kind of regulatory conversations and those broader conversations and discussions around the future of energy markets.
Thank you very much, Constant. And I see that slowly but steadily questions are rolling in. So we have a question from Karin. Karin is saying, COVID-19 crisis highlighted the need to delocalize production system, which could accelerate the decentralization of national energy system in line with the development of local renewable energies. And Karin is asking how citizens, local renewable energy producers and self-consumers are encouraged to be part of a more resilient and decentralized energy model for the regions. And she's also asking what support do city governments have to redefine and implement a different energy mix, including renewables. I don't know who wants to go first.
I can say a few words about resilience quickly, maybe, just looking at the first part of the question. But I think there's more and more studies that shows that a more decentralized or distributed energy system is likely to have some resilience benefits. I mean, it's not a silver bullet. I also think that sometimes we think it's the answer for everything. It might not be, but definitely a little bit more decentralization and distribution is likely to help the resilience of the energy system overall. I think a few examples recently of extreme weather events have showed that again and again, especially in the US, in New Orleans recently, or in New York a few years ago. You know, places that were able to operate as an isolated mini grids with on-site generation capacity and battery storage were the only places in the city that could keep the lights on during extreme hurricanes and other flooding events. So, you know, very interesting models there. I think this has been you know, not super developed because of the price of battery that is obviously coming down massively now, and will help to bring more of the resilience arguments into energy decarbonization discussions. That being said, this is very hard to monetize, very hard to find the right business models for it. And at the moment, we're not sure how to value the resilience value of those distributed energy systems. So not a very good answer from me there. I think this is, you know, more work to be done, basically. I don't think anyone has had a clear solutions for that. That being said, cities that have developed very comprehensive resilience strategies are looking at adopting more decentralized system to increase resilience. A few examples again from North America. Sorry, they're not from Europe, but it's just the one that comes to my head now. But Portland recently installed a battery and solar storage on a fire station. They have been working with the utility very closely to identify places in the city where they could develop non-wires alternatives, such as small solar systems with mini grids for critical facilities so that they can stay open in extreme weather events. So definitely an avenue there, but I think we're not quite sure yet exactly how to do that in the best way possible. But hopefully with the emergence of more battery storage, we'll be able to do so.
Thank you, Constant. No, I think we are here to discuss also the challenges that are still out there. So also a little bit of homework for ourselves looking at the future. Rana, I see that you're not on mute anymore, please.
Yes, actually, I was going to complement this. I think, like, just to complement what Constant said, over 50% of the mini grids installed, the mini grid market actually is driven by US emergency and resilience. So I think there are market signals which are very clear. And I think what is important here is not to think about the citizens in this context mainly, but very much about the private sector with regard to this. I take the example of public transportation fleets, and we had discussions with Alstom, for instance. They need to ensure so that they can accompany citizens in moving to public transportation 24/7-hour services. This requires not only an optimization on the transportation side, but also an energy security. And this is something which is really worth a price, basically, from the private sector side. We will publish a report together with UITP, the Union Internationale, it's the International Union of Public Transportation. I think it's different in English, because they clearly see that these are players that are very interested in energy security. And ultimately, the energy cost of fleet operators, public fleet operators, is after human resource costs the next one. So I think this is really a cost factor comes in. When it comes to the citizens here, and I think this is what can citizens do? The first thing citizens can do is ask where their energy comes from. See whether they can purchase green energy. And then, so green, very clearly, this means efficient and renewable based, not green fossil fuel based hydrogen. And the third one is then also choose basically energy providers that are promoting local renewable energy. And there are those differences. So I think the consumer choices are clearly sending very strong signals here. Now, on the question, I will just take the next question on the energy mix. It's not a European example, but I think it's really an example which I find really inspiring. Cape Town in South Africa. They have been very, very advanced on their decarbonizing strategies. And basically, they came after a couple of years to the point where they had to basically face the fact that they could not move on the energy side without suing the national government. And they have sued the national government to allow to decide where they buy their electricity from. And I think these are these examples which show that what is happening at the city level can have a major influence. And if you ask me what citizens can do with regard to this, I think is really knocking at the door of the municipal government and saying, what are you doing here? We want you to do these things. Having clearly a voice, because this can contribute to the change. And cities can build on the citizens or on the demand side, so the private sector, very actively in driving change. It's very clear that not everybody can do everything, but by strong collaboration and connecting the dots, I think this is where transformation becomes possible.
Thank you very much, Rana. Yann, would you like to also complement?
Yeah, maybe one compliment. Even if I support a lot all the decentralization about energy, we have to take care to be cautious about the miracle of decentralization. The first thing, we don't want to create a separate world between cities that can decentralize and the other part around the city, because we can maybe make the city more robust, but what happened around? The means are not the same from a rural countryside and the city. So we have to take care of that, about the solidarity. And one of the cases, of course, for example, in Europe, is the electricity grid. Of course, we can have mini grid around, but electricity grid in Europe is totally interconnected, totally dependent one on the other one, but also solidary one the other one. If there is a lack in Portugal, we can have a reinforcement from Italy, from Spain, from France to help. There's a connection in case there is a little blackout locally. So we have to take care of that, but it's very useful maybe to decrease the dependence, for example, on the impact of electricity, if we can decentralize, or what you need about heating, because we have a lot of district heating in Europe, for example, in a lot of cities worldwide, or now district cooling to decrease the demand of electricity, and that can be very locally, very reinforced to adapt the mix and to have a diverse energy in the mix and not to be dependent on only one electricity or only one sources. So that's very important, I think, in a heating system that more in a direct electricity system, to be sure.
Thank you. Please,
Giorgia, just one, because I think, Yann, this is a very important point you're raising. The interconnection of grids provides a flexibility. So in flexibility options, we always think about storage, and this is only one of many. So there is a better preview, digitalization, load management, and the interconnection plays a key role with regard to this. And again, I think to build on what you said, the interconnection with the heating demand and heating production, but also transport demand and production and the storage and electric mobility is another aspect which can basically lead to self-sufficient energy system, but not only locally, but really in a broader urban and peri-urban system, obviously connected, because I think the connection is really an important, especially in the regions where we do have a connection, we should also use it. But it does not mean that at the territorial part, you cannot really drive self-sufficiency and use basically the interconnection as a strategic asset.
Thank you very much. And speaking about different contributions, there is a question in the chat for all of you about your views on hydrogen's contribution, included in decentralized energy production and local consumption to the resilience of cities. So I would like you to park that thought for just a second. And I take the opportunity to remind everyone that yes, we do welcome still your question. Please make sure that you keep on typing down, but we also want to hear everyone's thought directly. So we thought of organizing a small exercise for everyone to engage in. So you will see now in the chat, but also you're able to access a little Mentimeter exercise. We would like you to go to the link that you're seeing right now on the chat, or go to www.menti.com and use the code 96808076. You will also find that into the chat right now. You will be asked to answer two questions. The first one is, why do we need cities in the energy transition? As soon as you responded to that one, you will be proposed a different question, that is, which challenges remain to accelerate the uptake of renewables in cities? There is no right or wrong answer. We just really want to hear your thoughts. So please do take the opportunity to respond to these questions so that we can also see what is the mood across our virtual room. So while you do that exercise, who would like to give it a first try with a question on hydrogen?
I'm happy to take on this. Now, from Renton one side, we obviously, as Renewable Network, we have a very clear opinion on what hydrogen means. There are different ways of producing hydrogen. Today, 99% of the hydrogen produced worldwide is fossil fuel based. Hydrogen is not an energy, but is an energy carrier. So, and I think this is something which is, there are many myths out there, but this requires some clarification. So hydrogen has a key role to play for some sectors that are difficult to decarbonize. This is in particular heavy industry and heavy transportation, where hydrogen can play a role. And what is very clear here is that with regard to this, we can only speak about renewable-based hydrogen, which means ramping up the capacities in renewable power heavily, ramping up the electrolyzer capacities heavily to really move into renewables, sustainable hydrogen-based economy. Now, when it comes to heating in buildings and transportation, there are much more efficient solutions already existing. According to the International Energy Agency, 50% of the decarbonization that needs to be reached can be reached with existing technologies. So I think it's a matter of deployment. So there is no excuse not to start investing now, actually heavily. So this is one aspect. And so they are more efficient and they are less costly. So there is actually not really a reason to develop hydrogen for most of the city users. We have some exceptions. This is in some cities where there is really excess electricity, where the cities or the regions can heavily contribute to produce renewable-based hydrogen, and really also, I think, integrate with other regions, make it useful, have a storage function, etc. So.
Thank you very much, Rana. I want to remind everyone that the Mentimeter is still open, so do please feel free to share your thoughts into our two little question and exercises. Yann, I see that there is a question for you in particular, and actually it's very much in line with a question that I had for you. Could you tell us a little bit more about how Paris can achieve its 100% renewable energy share in such dense city? And you will see in the chat that also our colleagues in particular from Tokyo are quite interested to see how that is going to play out. And here now is mentioning that Tokyo Metropolitan Government already has a strategy for 2050 carbon neutral. However, this is not a 100% renewable energy target yet.
And sure, we can't. We can't achieve locally. Of course, you know Paris. You have shown a picture from Heidelberg. Let's put the area of Heidelberg is 108 square kilometers. It's quite the same for Paris. It's 105, which little bit more population. So in such a density, it's totally impossible. We are not luckily like in Vancouver to get 90% from hydraulic power to get electricity. We have only one geothermal sources on the ground, and we have some sun, but very few space to implement. So we are realistic about that. One of the main challenge for the city of Paris when you're going to read the new climate action plan is to get, of course, 100% of renewable energy, but 20% produced locally. Currently, we are at 7%. We hope to get 10% by 2030, but 15 years ago, we were only at 4%. So first, to produce locally what we can by solar, by geothermal, of course, by also heat from recovery from industry, from incinerator, and so on. But the rest, how to get 100%, and how to get 100% when you are quite sure that the electricity of your country, we will still max maybe at 50%, even if some people want to change the classification about nuclear electricity, but I want to open the debate here. But one of the main goals, of course, for us, as I said before, is also to create solidarity with the rural countryside around the city of Paris and to reconnect the city with the rural countryside and to invest there where it's possible. And I think that as any city worldwide, we implement very bad initiative in our rural countryside before by industry, by incinerator, by logistic platform, and so on. And now is a way maybe to use that and to reconnect. We have three main pillars for the city of Paris. We want to offset, we want to get 50% of local food, as it was said for COVID-19 crisis. Short circuit was very, very important. And the last one of the three pillars is to get 100% of renewable energy. And we want to produce more that maybe we can have by the national mix. And so to produce locally, but to invest in rural countryside, but maybe wind farm in our fields and so on. So we launched a program to reconnect the city to the rural countryside. We work with, for example, the water company of City of Paris that belongs a lot of areas around 200 kilometers around Paris, how to invest to settle maybe sustainable and organic food, but also solar panels. And for example, in one of the solar water production plants of the City of Paris, we settled 15,000 square meters of solar panel recently. And so, and to create contract, positive contract, to create jobs locally, to create money locally, and of course, to supply the City of Paris and to supply everyone. So to create maybe a just transition between city and rural countryside and not to create two worlds separately. And it's the beginning of this challenge. So for Tokyo, I would like to share with them that we don't know if we succeed. It's the beginning of the steps, and maybe with the energy facilities, as Constance shown in London and Barcelona, we hope to accelerate this process for the future.
Thank you, Yann. So I think we should all stay tuned to see how, of course, this is going to be implemented. But speaking of things that are implemented, Constance, would you be able to share with us one single impactful example of an action that a city has taken to accelerate renewables deployment that you know of? I'm sure you know many, but can you share one?
Sure. One thing I wanted to say first is, when you hear that Paris is going to produce 20% of the energy locally, that's a very big number. We've heard Heidelberg at 33%. Seoul is looking to deploy 5 gigawatts of solar PV within the city. Yes, it's not 100%, but it's already so much. And given the amount of renewable electricity capacity that needs to be added to the grid, the more we can maximize the local potential within cities, the better. So I think this, it's really amazing to have this approach. In answer to your question, we had a bit of a chat before, and I suggested that we could ask that. The reason for that is really to say there's no silver bullet, and I wanted to reiterate the message that it's about looking at what you can do in your local context as a city, depending on the regulatory power that you have, and not thinking that there's one action that is the thing that every city needs to do. Having a target is obviously incredibly important. If possible, 100% renewable target and a plan. Of course, it is the basis for progress. But otherwise, look at everything you can do, from maximizing the amount of renewable energy that is produced locally through mandates in building codes, through financial incentives to residents, through financial incentives to businesses. Also make it easier for residents to be able to apply for licenses to install solar PV, maybe help them to make it cheaper by implementing aggregated procurement schemes, but also look at offsite options. Can you help businesses to sign aggregated power purchase agreements like Melbourne has done? Can you help citizens to switch to green electricity suppliers through energy concierge type or energy advisor type services like Barcelona, and I believe Paris has that as well. Also look at options to decarbonize heating and cooling, whether it is through district energy systems like Yann has talked about, or through banning the use of natural gas in new buildings, or maybe helping people to understand how they can install a heat pumps within their building or their house. And finally, make sure that there is space for innovation as well. Make sure that there is a space for energy entrepreneurs, for energy companies to come together and look at some of those percentages that are left in our decarbonization needs that we don't know yet how to address. So there's not one single action, but there is definitely something that the city can do wherever the city is in the world, whatever their power is and whatever resources are available. And I think that's really the key message that we're trying to push at C40 is embrace the opportunity and look through everything that's going on in this field, because there will be something that's relevant for your city.
Thank you very much, Constance. So no silver bullets, but lots of very good ideas to copy and be inspired by. So I think this is very important. Speaking of no silver bullet and no one solution, maybe we can have a look at the results of our Mentimeter and see a little bit what people are thinking around the two questions that we have shared. So I'll remind you the question. The first one was, why do we need cities in the energy transition? And I can see that we have quite a few interesting responses. So, well, first of all, the importance of cities in reaching the 1.5 degrees pathway, but also the important comment around the independence from fossil fuel has been brought up. I think also quite a few have mentioned the flexibility on acting quickly and really implementing action on the ground that cities have. And I think Constance made it clear, of course, with the appropriate mandates. It's obviously not something that is always doable, but definitely within the scope. Quite a few ideas that are coming forward. I don't know whether there is any specific point that takes the attention in particular of our speakers that they might want to be commenting on. I don't know, Rana, for example, is there anything in particular that captured your eye?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think many really interesting contributions. I'll just take this last one. Cities have the power to influence the type of energy used. And I think this is really something, so I fully agree with Constance. It is about embracing the ideas, the opportunities that are there. But I also think that cities are, because of the diversity of players you have in the city environment, there is a reason why there is innovation hubs here. There is a reason when we're looking even in basic creativity rules, diversity brings other ideas and other actions and other levers you can activate. So I really think that cities with regard to this are a key lever to drive basically the change towards renewable energy because of this diversity and because of the innovation potential which is there. And then just to build on if I recall correctly, globally 80% of the GDP is basically located in cities. So there is really an economic power too, and I think there is very clearly the solidarity between cities and the suburban and rural areas, which is also building on this economic power that makes a lot of sense when we're looking at the development of national transitions.
Thank you very much, Rana. And we spoke about the potential, but now it's time to look a little bit into the challenges that our audience is still identifying. So the question was, which challenges remain to accelerate the uptake of renewables in cities? So we have a few here keywords, and I would invite maybe also Yann and Constant to comment together with me on the different feedback that we received from our audience. I think lack of funding pops up immediately there. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but I don't know if you maybe also have the feeling that that's definitely one of the biggest constraints. I think human capacity constraint is also interesting. It's very much related to the resources that we have at our disposal to implement this transition. Financing to renovate buildings is in there. So I think that there is a little bit of a red thread also around this capacity. I don't know, Constant, Yann, would you like to comment on that too?
Of course, oftenly lack of funding is coming usually to discuss about that. I think it's not the only barriers about development of renewable energy. Lack of funding to connect to the proposal of financing to renovate buildings, that's a main issue. To finance the retrofitting of the stock of old buildings in city of Paris, like a lot of cities, it's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge for people, for private joint owner, and it's a long work, because, for example, in Paris, buildings of private owners who wants to retrofit, and where there is no issue about funding, no issue about the decision, takes around 6 to 8 years. So imagine if there is any issue of funding, any issue of the decision to convince one of joint owner. And I didn't say that I want to implement any solar cells, for example. We need maybe 10 years. So it's not enough faster, of course. So there is a lack of regulations, a lack of national, European, and of course sometimes local regulations, because it's a very huge and hard decision for the political level. It's easy for my side to talk about that. I'm in the administrations, and like I say, that is what we want and what we need. But to take a decision that to oblige retrofittings for such a buildings with such a level of performance, it's a very hard decision politically, and currently after the crisis, you need a very, very important courage, but we need also a pathway to explain to people what they can get now of type of incentive, of fundings maybe, and before to have, how we say it in English, the stick and the carrot, because one day there is a stick, and not maybe by the local or national level, because the price is too expensive. In the case of the gas, currently the price of the gas now, and that's one of the main thing. But I think that we have to improve all of them, the coordination between all the different levels to erase the little barriers that prevent to act correctly.
Thank you, Yann. I think your point again about having this enabling framework that needs to be there in order to act, I think it's very important. I think there are a lot of plans that are being developed at the different levels, but of course this lack of synergy between them sometimes is really one of the main hindrances in then acting and moving forward to implementation. So absolutely a very good point. Constant, would you like to complement as well, or to comment to one of the points that was raised by our audience?
Yeah, not much to what Yann said, to be honest. I mean, I think every time you try to touch the building envelope, it's difficult. It takes time, and because it involves so many people, so many decision makers, so much impact on people's lives, that it makes it very difficult. And as Yann, often points out, this question of energy retrofits and renewable energy deployment go hand in hand, and they need to be looked like together. So definitely a very big difficulty there. I'm also not very surprised to see lack of coordination between levels of government. Again, this question of multi-level governance and of cities' autonomy to make decisions on energy supply, I think is a key issue. Human capacity constraint, again, not that surprised to see that. I think that's something we see globally, but again, because cities have not been seen as central actors of the energy transition, they don't always have, the departments, the staff, the skills that they need to look at specific renewable energy strategies. So I would say it's in a way great to see that everyone kind of agrees on the challenges. Also a little bit disheartening that I feel like we haven't. Those challenges have been the same for a few years now, and unfortunately, we still don't fully know how to crack them.
Thank you. We are almost at time. Oh, Rana, would you like to add?
Yes, just a thought, because while listening to this, and I agree with Constant, we see basically similar challenges since many years, but I also think that we have learned many things, and probably sometimes transposing from one area to the other can also give some ideas. I just thought, like, on the a topic on the building part. I think it's one of you, either Constant or Yann, you had mentioned the part that depending on the city, there are other, or the solutions will differ from a city to another. But I think a principle that works for the building sector is the market segmentation. There are public buildings, there's commercial buildings, and there's private buildings. There are new buildings and there are existing buildings. And by segmenting those markets already, any city can find solutions for public buildings and new buildings, at least public, commercial, new buildings, because here we are speaking about other types of spaces, even if you're in a historic city like Rome or Paris. So this is one part, and then the other one I think was a mayor or the representative for the responsible for energy from the city of ICLEI. We had done a really interesting calculation, and he said, like, when you're looking at a solution and an economic business model on a building or at an individual energy consumer side, yes, the economic case is not there for renewable energy, but when you're clustering this together, the economic balance changes. And I think on the city level side, sorry, on the building side, looking at district strategies makes sense here, because probably in a district there might be buildings that are easier to retrofit than others. And we see that in transport, for instance, a district approach is really key. When it comes to urban planning, it's key. When it comes to district heating, it's key. So it might also be an interesting entry point for the building side. And I'll end on one thought. From Renton one side, we are clearly calling for making renewable energy, in particular the renewable energy share, a key performance indicator for any economic, political investment decision, because energy is everywhere. And I think one of the challenges we still face, basically in the city level or at city administrations, but also national administrations, even in companies, is that the different business units don't talk to each other, so to say, and don't have a deep understanding and integrate the renewable energy in their own agenda, whether it is transport, whether it is building, whether it is energy, whatsoever, economic developments. And this will also help, I think, to prepare the workforce differently.
Thank you very much, Rana. And well, we are almost at time, unfortunately. So you talked about different types of incentives that will be bringing us forward into implementing this energy transition. And I would like to ask to each of you, if you could give me one key ingredient that you think will be driving the transition from now to 2030, 2040, and 2050. I don't know who wants to start.
I'll say two key ingredients. One, public procurement, and the other one, I think, systems change and system thinking, which means like focusing in future education and hiring processes, etc., not on the expertise per se, but players who can connect the dots and train all future decision makers on better connecting the dots.
Very important point, this integration, even within the different departments, we still talk about it very much. I think you're absolutely right. Connecting the dots, it's crucial for our future. Constant, would you guys to go next?
Sure, I'm trying to find something different to say, because I think the first one was similar. Conversation on cooling needs is going to become more and more important, and thus will force us to think even more about thermal comfort and about how we live in our cities. I think this will drive part of how cities are powered in the future. That would be one. The second one, I think the corporate movement towards renewables will have an impact as well, given that they represent a large part of energy consumption in cities. So how cities and businesses can work together on those questions, I think would be very important.
Thank you very much. Constant, Yann, what is your ingredient?
So a new ingredient. No, first, as I said before, sobriety for any energy demand is very important. I don't want to have more and more energy. It's not to spend it correctly. So sobriety is very important, and I really insist about regulations. It's very well, because Rana said what I want to say about what we can do on public procurement. Of course, there is a huge role and initiative from city, but we need regulation, local regulation, a national regulation or European regulation for us. It's very, very important to accelerate, because one moment we need regulation. At the beginning, we can be the city, the carrot in city, but one moment we need to accelerate to foster the stick, and only the regulation can help that.
Thank you very much, Yann. Thank you, Rana, and thank you, Constant, for your thoughts and for your insights. Thank you also to all the audience for being with us, and also for indulging us with our little exercise on Mentimeter. We touched upon a very wide number of topics today. We talked about commitment and political leadership and the courage that that takes to be ambitious and to try to really embrace this goal of becoming 100% renewables. We talked about the road ahead of us, still quite long, looking into how to better decarbonize our heating system, looking into cooling, expanding our infrastructures, be better connected between different sectors, including, for example, the great potential of mobility. We also talked about this infrastructural change that needs to happen, not only in terms of the investment that we put on the ground, but also in terms of our mindset, with this lack of awareness that is still, unfortunately, there in some instances of cities and other important players that don't feel quite yet themselves a player into the energy market, although they have a very wide role, of course, to play. That said, we did talk about a lot of things that are happening also on the ground, and a lot of inspiring examples that are popping up all over the world. So I want to conclude also by focusing on those, inviting everyone to have a read, both to the climate plan of Paris and their vision for the future, but also the report of REN 21, looking into what is the state of play, but also thinking positively about the future. We talked about renewable energy as a solution, not only to deliver the energy that we need in our houses, but also a way to democratize our energy system and bringing closer citizens from the urban and the regional and the rural level, and also engaging them directly into being participatory within the different transition that is happening from now on. So I think a lot of different important aspects, a lot of road still ahead of us, but also a lot of opportunities that are still lying ahead. And I think this is the positive thinking that we should bring forward towards 2030, 2050, hopefully also towards the COP26 in a couple of weeks from now. Lots of work to do, but also lots of people and lots of stakeholders and lots of cities that want to walk the talk. So with that, I want to thank everyone once again for your time, and I look forward to our next discussion all together on how we can mainstream renewable energy everywhere in the world, also with the support of our cities, but the support of everyone and all the stakeholders that have to be on board. So thank you once again, and I wish you all a wonderful evening.